بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, we'll continue our lesson in the book Sullam, Kitab Sullam Al-Munawraq, written by Imam Al-Akhdari in the field of Mantiq. And in our last lesson we are speaking about the chapter of Qiyas, or in English we call it any syllogism. And in the last lesson we mentioned about so many of the conditions of having a valid argument or a sound argument. So when we mentioned that arguments in logic, they are made up of premises, and this in Arabic we call it the muqaddimah. So we have the first premise, and we have the second premise, and so on and so forth. So premises it can be a lot, and it doesn't mean that it is only two premises. But usually we just give any examples due to the simplicity for us to understand this topic. But premises basically can be a lot, and then you have the conclusion. You have the conclusion. So what we'll do right now, we will read again what is mentioned by the author. So basically this is where we started babun fil qiyas. The author began by speaking about the definition of qiyas, that it is an argument that you have the premises and then you deduce the conclusion from those premises. And then he mentioned summa al-qiyasu indahum qismani faminhum ma yud'a bil-iqtirani. Then he mentioned there are two types of syllogism. Number one is called al-iqtirani, and number two is al-istisna'i. And then he goes on to speak about qiyas al-iqtirani. This is basically where we are, where he mentioned وَهُوَ الَّذِي دَلَّ عَلَى النَّتِيجَةِ بِقُوَّةٍ وَاخْتَصَّ بِالْحَمْلِيَّةِ. So he mentioned that the first type of qiyas, the qiyas iqtirani, it is a type of syllogism that you are able to deduce the natija, yani the conclusion, from the arrangement of the premises. From the arrangement of the premises. So it is something that is profound, that due to the arrangement of those premises, you can deduce the natija, yani the conclusion. And then he mentioned that this is specifically on proposition. So the conclusions must be in a form of a proposition, and not be in a form of a question, in the form of a question, or in the form of an exception, and so on and so forth. So it must be a proper proposition with a subject and with a predicate proposition, and that you can say whether it is a true statement or a false statement. So then only we can speak about qiyas iqtirani. So the arrangement of those propositions must be in a way that we are able to deduce the conclusion. So last week I gave examples of arguments that you cannot deduce the conclusion because it is not related. It is not related. And for example, we say that human beings can think, horses make their sound. So there is no connection between human beings and horses in these two propositions. So one is speaking about human beings, the other one is speaking about horses. So there must be a connection in order for us to deduce the conclusion. So this is basically what he mentioned. For in turid tarkibahu, yet if you want to arrange the premises, farakkiba muqaddimatihi ala ma wajaba, then you have to follow the arrangement of those premises to such an extent that the meanings of those propositions are true, and that they are related to one another, so that you can deduce the conclusion. Then he mentioned warattibil muqaddimati wanzura sahihaha min fasidin mukhtabira. So after you have arranged those premises, then you look at those premises and whether it is something that is true or false. So if it is something that is false, then the conclusion or the natija will also be false. So we have to ascertain that the premises must be true in order for us to say that this is a sound argument, that the conclusion of this argument and the result of this argument is also true. So this is what we covered. I'm just doing some revision. Then he mentioned وَرَتِّبِ الْمُقَدِّمَاتِ وَانْظُرَ صَحِيحَهَا مِنْ فَاسِدٍ مُخْتَبِرًا. This is the same as the other one. فَإِنَّ لَازِمَ الْمُقَدِّمَاتِ بِحَسَبِ الْمُقَدِّمَاتِ آتِي وَمَا مِنَ الْمُقَدِّمَاتِ سُرَّ فَيَجِبُ إِنْدِرَاجُهَا فِي الْكُبْرَى. So our lesson will begin from number 77. Before that he mentioned فَإِنَّ لَازِمَ الْمُقَدِّمَاتِ بِحَسَبِ الْمُقَدِّمَاتِ آتِي. So the truth of a premise it depends on the truth of the other premises. And if all the premises are true sentences, are true propositions, then only you can get benefit from that argument. But if any one of those premises is not true, then you will not get a true natija. So let us go back to our examples. This is so many of the examples. And earlier we mentioned that there must be related. It must be related. The premises they must be arranged in a way they are related. So for example, if a person say kullu insan himar, all humans are donkey. All humans are donkey. This is a false statement. Wa kullu himar sahal, and all donkeys make this sound sound of horses, which is also not true. Then when comes to the deduction, kullu insan sahal, you will also get a false natija, conclusion. So this is an example when you have false propositions and false premises, it will entail a false conclusion. So this is where the author is saying that you must make sure that all these premises must be true in order for you to deduce the proper natija. The next example, now when we look at this example. So we are going to speak about this part, where he mentioned وَمَا مِنَ الْمُقَدِّمَاتِ سُرَّ فَيَجِبُ إِنْدِرَاجُهَا فِي الْكُبْرَى. So this is a new terminology that we are going to learn. We have muqaddima surah. It is called the small premise or the minor premise. And then you have the major premise. Minor premise, and then you have the major premise. So what does it mean by minor premise and major premise? So this is an example that I will just run through. So let us look at this form of qiyas, or this syllogism, this argument. So now you have this first premise, and as what we mentioned, we have the muqaddimatul ula. The first muqaddimah, the first premise. This one is the second premise. Tamam? So you have the second premise, and then here you have the and then you will have the natija. Later on we will deduce the natija from here. Okay. So let us just focus on this example. So I will just translate this. The first premise says kullu insan hayawan. So based on our lessons in Mantiq, when we say kullu, this is universal. This is this if you see kullu, it is what you call it. It is mujib, it is a positive proposition, positive sentence, and it is a universal one. It is not a particular one. So you have a universal positive proposition. So it says kullu insan hayawan, meaning all humans are beings, living beings. So this is a true statement. All humans are beings. So in order for us to ascertain whether it is true statements, of course we have to speak about the evidences. So are all humans beings? Yes, all humans are beings. This is easy. There is no need for us to bring about complex evidences pertaining to this. And then we have the second muqaddimah. The second muqaddimah. So let us pay attention to this part first, hayawan. So this is the predicate of the first muqaddimah. This is the predicate of the first muqaddimah. This is the predicate of the first muqaddimah, and it is a subject of the second muqaddimah. This is subject of the second muqaddimah. And then we have this insan. This is the subject of the first muqaddimah. And then we have jism. Jism is the predicate of the second muqaddimah. So now we have kullu insan hayawan, all humans are beings, and then wa kullu hayawan jismun. It means all beings are bodies. All beings are bodies. Okay, now we are going to deduce the natija. What is the conclusion? So, kullu insan hayawan, all humans are beings, wa kullu hayawan jism, all beings are bodies. So the natija is kullu insan jism. Kullu insan jism, all humans are bodies. All humans are bodies. So in Arabic we will say kullu insan jismun. Kullu insan jismun. Kullu insan jismun, all humans are bodies. So now when we look at again, this is initially yellow in color. So I will just put yellow, and then jism is the green one. Okay, this is the thing that we have to understand. If you have the subject of the natija, the subject of the natija is called the small muqaddimah. The subject of the natija. What is the subject of the natija? Insan, correct or not? This is the subject of the conclusion. So where is the proposition where you have the subject of the conclusion? So you have it at the first proposition or the first premise. So this premise is called muqaddimatu surah, the small muqaddimah. It is called muqaddimah as-surah. Why is called the muqaddimah surah? Because the subject of the natija is the subject of the muqaddimah. So in order for us to ascertain where is the small muqaddimah, it goes back to what is the subject of the natija. So now we have the subject of the natija, and the subject is present in the first premise. So we call the first premise muqaddimatu surah. And then we have muqaddimatul kubra, the large muqaddimah, the large premise. The large premise is when the predicate of the natija falls under it. So it is the second proposition. The second proposition. So second proposition is considered to be the large muqaddimah. And then we have this word hayawan repeating in both of these premises. Kullu insan hayawan wa kullu hayawan jism. We call it the haddul awsat, and in Mantiq we call it the intermediary. The intermediary. So this is the thing that is binding the two propositions. So we call it haddul awsat. So kullu insan hayawan wa kullu hayawan jismun. So you do not find the haddul awsat in the muqaddimah. So what you find any is, this is from the Muqaddimah Surah, this is from the Muqaddimah Kubra. So Muqaddimah Surah is where the subject any is in the Natija. Muqaddimah Kubra is when the predicate any is in the Natija. So these are so many of the terms any that our scholars in Mantiq any they use when they analyze arguments. When they analyze arguments, because before this any we are going into the types any of arguments. So these are some any of the terminology. So we have Muqaddimatul Surah, we have Muqaddimatul Kubra, and we have Al-Haddul Awsat. So we have any the minor Muqaddimah, the major Muqaddimah, and then we have the middle. The middle any is the thing and that is binding what you call it in between the two propositions. So this is any basically what any the author any will mention here. So now when we go back into Sullam, the author any mentioned wama minal muqaddimati surah. So now and this is the term and just now I was explaining. Muqaddimat as-surah yani is when the subject of the natija is present in it. So in that case any earlier it is any the first any premise. Fayajibu indirajuha fil kubra. So there must be indiraj. Any indiraj any meaning it must be attached to the kubra. There must be a relationship. What is any the relationship? So this is any the example. So now when we analyze any this argument, how is the first premise and the second premise any related? The answer any will be the word hayawan. Because when we say kullu insan hayawan, all humans any are beings. And then the second any premise and say all beings. Now we repeat any the predicate. So now when we are binding the second premise with the first premise. So this is the meaning of indiraj. Indiraj. And in Arabic we call it indiraj. There is a connection. And that any connection is through haddul awsat. It is the thing that binds the two any proposition, proposition together. So as what I mentioned earlier, there must be this binding factor. Otherwise we cannot deduce the natija. We cannot deduce the conclusion. So premises must be related to one another. This is where the author mentioned yajibu indirajua. So there must be able to do indiraj. So there must be a relation between the first premise and the second premise. So there must be the haddul awsat in place in order for us to ascertain the natija later on. So he mentioned wama minal muqaddimati surah fayajibu indirajuha fil kubra. So al kubra is where the predicate of the natija is. Wa dhatu haddin asgharin surahuma wa dhatu haddin akbarin kubrahuma. So this is what we mentioned. What you call it when comes to the subject of the natija. This is from the muqaddimah surah. And when comes to the predicate of the natija comes from muqaddimah al-kubra. And then he mentioned wa asrarun fadaka dhun diraji wa wasatun yulra ladal intaji. And then he mentioned what is needed is the surah. As for the wusta, the wasat, the middle one. The middle one is the binding one. This is not mentioned in the conclusion. So what is mentioned in the conclusion is surah. This is haddul surah or haddul asrar. This is haddul akbar. This is haddul awsat. And these are many other terminologies. Haddul asrar, haddul akbar, haddul awsat. So haddul awsat is the one that is binding. But what is mentioned in the natija is haddul asrar and haddul akbar. So this is called muqaddimah asura. This is called Muqaddimatul Kubra. It is called Muqaddimah Surah because what you call it, the subject of the natija is there, and this is called Muqaddimatul Kubra because the predicate of the natija is there. But as far as the Haddul Awsat is concerned, this is where the author mentioned Yulra. It is not mentioned in the natija. You don't see any hayawan in the natija. Ladal intaji, when you deduce the conclusion. So this is what the author mentioned. So I hope this simple illustration make it easy for us to understand this what the author is speaking about. This is just simple examples. There are many other examples that we can use But then we stick to one so that it becomes easy for us to focus and to understand the connection between the subjects and the predicates of all these premises, and how we deduce the natija, and how we determine what is a minor premise, what is a major premise, and what is the binding factor between the two premises. So these are some of the terms the author mentioned. Inshallah ta'ala, next week we will go into the types of syllogism in greater detail. But before we go into that topic, this thing must be clear. So when we say muqaddimatul ula, we must understand what is the author is speaking about. Muqaddimatul kubra, what is it? Haddul asrar, what is it? Haddul akbar, what is it? Haddul awsat, what is it? What is the natija, the mawdu, the subject of the natija, the predicate of the natija. So all these things are taken into account when we analyze arguments. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.